Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we sift through stacks of articles, research, and, well, our own notes, really, to pull out the key insights. We want to give you a shortcut to being properly informed. Today, our mission is to take a deep dive into some tech developments that are maybe a bit surprising, but definitely interconnected. We think they reveal patterns that might just change how you see things.
That's right. And, at first glance, these topics might seem all over the place. We're jumping from like how you shop online all the way to cutting-edge AI and even the sort of geopolitical stuff shaping tech. But as we unpack them, you'll start to see the threads, how it's all part of this bigger picture of innovation, business, and, well, how we behave as consumers.
Absolutely. So let's kick things off with something that affects pretty much everyone, online shopping. Specifically, let's talk about that juggernaut, Amazon Prime Day. It feels like deep discounts are just, expected now when we shop online. And for a lot of us, it really feels like Amazon set that aggressive tone, didn't it? What was it about Prime Day that really shook up retail?
It's fascinating how it's grown, actually. Prime Day started, 11 years ago? Just a single day, almost like an experiment. This year stretched into a 4-day thing. And the consumer adoption is just incredible. But the really big shift, I think, if we look at the wider context, is how everyone else followed suit. Now, you've got Walmart, Target, Kohl's, Wayfair. They all run their own big summer sales, often just extending their July 4th deals. It's not just Amazon anymore. It's basically the summer shopping season.
Okay, so if everyone's doing it right, big summer sales, chasing the same customers, what's Amazon's edge? How do they still manage to stand out when it's so crowded and discount heavy?
Well, their core playbook, based on what we've read, hasn't really changed much. Selection, price, and convenience. They've always gone for that huge assortment and competitive prices. But the real differentiator, the aha moment for their strategy, is that logistics mode. It's not just about delivering faster. It's this underlying engine that creates this amazing feedback loop of data. Every single package, every route optimization, it all feeds back into their system.
That's really their superpower, isn't it? I remember reading the story about someone buying, like, a 7-foot fishing rod on day 1 of Prime Day, and it showed up the next morning. That kind of speed, that reliability at scale, it's a logistical marvel and really, really hard for anyone else to copy.
Exactly. And this whole infrastructure, it's not just for moving boxes around. If you connect the dots, Amazon's way more than just a retailer now. It's a massive logistics company, yes, but it's also increasingly a huge player in advertising.
Right, and that shift towards handling advertising more holistically, we're seeing that everywhere, aren't we? Companies moving away from the old ad agency model. They want to, tie together the whole customer journey, search, social, retail much more smoothly.
And what's really interesting is how effective it is. What we're seeing, particularly lately, is this thing called retail media. Basically, using retailer data to target ads and measure if they worked. It's become one of the fastest growing parts of the entire media landscape. Believe it or not, there's now more money spent on retail media than on traditional TV ads. Think about Amazon's deal with Roku. They can literally use what you bought on Amazon before to show you specific ads on your TV. And then this is key, they can track what happens next. Did you search for the product? Put it in your cart, actually buy it.
It's a pretty sophisticated setup, and that's exactly how these retail shifts directly impact your shopping habits and, the personalized ads you see constantly. It all connects the fast delivery, the specific ad on your screen. Okay, so speaking of what big tech is doing, it's not just about what you buy, it's also about what they're building. And there's a really interesting contrast in how two giants are tackling their product pipelines. First, let's look at Apple, their famous iterative strategy. What's supposedly coming down the pike for 2026, besides the usual fall stuff like the iPhone 17 and new watches?
Right. So for 2026, the reports suggest upgraded iPad Pros, an upgraded Vision Pro headset. Then, early in the year, new MacBook Pros, a new external monitor from Apple, some new low-end iPads, and mid-tier iPad Airs, too. There's even talk of an iPhone 17e, which kind of signals a change, maybe annual updates for the entry-level iPhones, bringing them in line with the flagships.
But what really jumps out, reading through the materials, is that none of these sound revolutionary, or even redesigned, really. A lot of it sounds like what people call chip-and-ship updates, basically just swapping out the processor for a slightly newer one.
Exactly. And that's not just about small performance bumps. It kind of signals that the whole smartphone and device market is maturing. We're hitting those, loss of physics walls, like you said, those huge 50%, 75%, even 100% jumps in chip speed we used to get every year. Those days are, frankly, like 5 years gone. It forces Apple and everyone else, really, to rethink innovation. moving away from just raw power towards maybe more refined experiences or deeper AI stuff.
And speaking of AI, Apple apparently had this smart home hub planned like a home pod with a screen heavily focused on AI that was supposed to launch last March. Now it's pushed to early next year, and the reason seems to be delays with new Siri features. The sources mention something called App Intense. What is that exactly?
App intense.
Yeah, the rumor is that's the key to making Siri much, much smarter. It's supposed to let you give really precise multi-step commands that work across different apps. Like imagine saying, find that photo from last summer, crop it square for Instagram, and send it to Sarah. All in one go without touching anything, so the hardware probably needs to be ready for those complex voice commands, which likely explains the delay. So for you listening, what does Apple's focus on these iterative updates mean for when you upgrade your tech? It makes you think, what's the real value beyond just a bit more speed?
That's a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now let's pivot to a totally different approach. Hugging Face's open source AI robot, Reachy. This sounds like something straight out of science fiction. Can you describe Reachy for us?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Reachy is described as an 8-robot platform for human-robot interaction. It's built specifically for that natural interaction. It moves its head, its arms, can show basic emotions, and it's got sensors, camera, mic, speakers. The main idea is you can connect Reachy to the latest AI models for things like generating speech or understanding images. So it's more of a platform than just a finished product you buy.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
How accessible it is. It apparently ships as a kit, almost like advanced Lego. So you can actually assemble it pretty easily, maybe even with family. And crucially, apps developed for it can run locally, so your data doesn't necessarily get sent off to the cloud. But the real kicker, the potential game changer, is the community aspect. Hugging Face gives you an SDK, a software development kit, so users can build new apps and behaviors for Reachy. Like maybe you design it to be a cooking assistant, giving you tips while you cook. And once you build something cool, you can share it, and suddenly all the other Reachy robots out there can use it too.
Why do you think open source is so uncommon in robotics, though? Especially for something relatively advanced like this, we don't see many open source humanoid robots.
That's a great question. A lot of the traditional robotics focus has been on these super expensive humanoid robots, costing $80,000 or even more. For something that expensive, open source maybe doesn't make immediate business sense right now. But Reachy, while capable, is simpler. It can't walk, for instance. That relative simplicity makes the open source model work. It lowers the barrier to entry massively and allows this huge range of community-driven creativity. Apparently, Reachy's actually sold globally, about 40% outside the U.S. And they even have plans to source parts locally and build them in different places around the world, making it even more decentralized.
Wow, it's a really fascinating contrast. So, for you listening, which approach do you find more compelling? The closed, iterative updates like Apple, or this open, community-driven innovation like Hugging Face? And what kind of robot helper would you want? I think I need one to sort out my desk. It's chaos. Okay, let's shift gears again. Let's talk about the quiet engine running behind a huge chunk of the global economy, SAP. This company, based in Germany, is now Europe's most valuable, worth over 300 billion euros. And it's powering the essential operations of more than 90% of the Fortune 500. Companies like Coca-Cola, Apple, Walmart, Nestle, they all rely on SAP.
Yeah, and what's really incredible about SAP is how sticky their business is. Companies have spent years, sometimes decades, embedding their critical data and complex processes into SAP systems. That makes it incredibly difficult and expensive to switch, even with tough competition from Oracle, Microsoft, Salesforce, you name it. And the market sees that stability. SAP's stock is actually priced higher relative to earnings than Microsoft, Meta, or Apple right now. That's a huge vote of confidence from investors.
It really sounds like this quiet foundational giant. And their CEO, Christian Klein, made this massive decision back in 2020. He decided to shift SAP from selling traditional software licenses to cloud subscriptions. He called it a fundamental transformation and basically said if they didn't do it, it would be game over for SAP. It was a huge bet, but it's expected to fuel their growth well into the 2030s.
Absolutely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, SAP's unique advantage is their deep, deep understanding of end-to-end business processes. Everything from sales and HR to finance and supply chains. With over 400,000 customers, they're sitting on just a massive amount of real-world operational data. So the natural question is, how are they using AI? Well, they've developed this digital assistant called Joule. And what's unique about Joule is that it combines large language models with SAP's structured business data. This lets them create a type of business AI that other tech companies just can't replicate right now because they don't have that same depth of real-world business context. It's about applying AI to understand workflows, not just, writing code or automating simple tasks.
So even though you might not interact with SAP directly as a consumer, it's truly this quiet engine behind so many businesses globally. It indirectly touches the products and services you use every single day. The reach is just enormous. Now, staying with SAP for a moment, let's talk about Europe's role in the global AI race. SAP CEO Christian Klein has some strong views on this. Where does he think Europe actually stands?
Klein's view is that the AI race is not decided yet for Europe, especially when you look at the software layer, which he sees as crucial. He argues Europe shouldn't try to go head-to-head with the U.S. and China on hardware and basic infrastructure, things like building chips or massive data centers. They're already way ahead there. Instead, Europe should play to its strengths, focus on developing the best AI applications for industries where Europe is already strong, like life sciences, logistics, manufacturing, the underlying innovation, the large language models, the infrastructure that's happening. Now it's about building smart software and AI on top of that.
Okay, but what about regulation, specifically the EU AI Act? Is that helping or hindering innovation? You hear arguments that it could stifle smaller companies, startups.
Well, according to Klein, the EU AI Act has the exact right intent. He supports the goal of regulating the tech and ensuring fair competition. The problem, he says, is in the implementation. Right now, it's fragmented. Different EU member states have their own overlapping AI rules and different ways of interpreting the main act. This makes it incredibly tough for a startup to scale across Europe. Klein really emphasizes the need for one framework, not, as he put it, 20 different ones with 100 different interpretations. He feels that without that unity, true scaling just won't happen.
That leads to another key concept he mentioned, sovereignty in technology. What does that actually mean for Europe? Is it just about where the data centers are located?
Klein defines sovereignty mainly around data. Where is it located, who can access it, and, very importantly, is it encrypted properly? SAP, for instance, offers a European-only cloud option managed entirely by SAP for customers who prioritize that level of control. He kind of dismisses worries about using US-made hardware components, arguing that real sovereignty isn't about the origin of every single chip, but about controlling your data. He also points out that European companies aren't necessarily dependent on the big U.S. cloud providers, the hyperscalers like AWS or Azure. They can always shift workloads to their own data centers if they want, or just use the hyperscalers for specific things like automation while still keeping control of the data itself.
It's definitely a complex balancing act. And for you, listening, it really makes you think about that tricky relationship between encouraging innovation and putting guardrails in place, especially with something as powerful and fast-moving as AI, and how that plays out differently around the world. All right, let's shift now to the actual impact of AI. Are companies really seeing a return on investment? We hear so much hype, but where is the money actually flowing, both for their clients and, inside their own operations?
We're definitely seeing revenues accelerate for the big cloud players, Amazon, Google Cloud, Microsoft. Microsoft especially has been talking about how their AI backlogs are turning directly into revenue now. But beyond just the giants, what's really interesting is how AI seems to be having a democratizing effect, particularly in advertising. It's making it easier and cheaper to create and deploy ads, and that's building real momentum across the whole marketing world.
We hear these buzzwords in earnings calls, right? Efficiency narratives, better margin trajectories. But how are companies balancing the huge costs, the capital expenditure, the capex of investing in AI with sometimes cutting jobs? It feels like a bit of a contradiction.
It's definitely a key tension, yeah. What the sources seem to suggest is that companies are finding real efficiencies in their core businesses. And it's not just about salaries, it's about streamlining entire processes. They're also getting better at identifying specific profit pools where they can measure a tangible ROI from AI investments. So moving beyond just tracking cloud spend to actually proving financial benefits. And the opportunity is broadening out, too. It's not just the hyperscalers anymore. Companies like Pinterest, even Afflovin, are building significant AI capabilities now. As for making money from consumer AI, well, expect subscriptions like Google Gemini Pro or ChatGPT Pro, plus commerce tie-ins, and of course, advertising. Although, maybe a bit cynically in my 20 years covering tech, I've never actually seen a subscription fee go down.
Huh? That's practically a law of physics, isn't it? Like tech gravity for your wallet. So it does make you wonder, if prices keep creeping up, how much of those AI efficiencies are really benefiting the end consumer? Still, I suppose these efficiencies could eventually make services better, more effective, and maybe, just maybe, impact prices someday. Okay, speaking of things impacting daily life, let's quickly touch on autonomous tech. Tesla's got these bold plans talking about driverless taxis in California and Arizona. After that limited test in Austin, Elon Musk has been very vocal shaping that story.
Right. But what's important to clarify, based on the reporting, is that while Musk is talking a big game, Tesla hasn't actually even started the permit process needed for fully driverless operations in places like San Francisco. In California, they have a permit to test with a human safety driver behind the wheel, but that's totally different from true driverless service. Companies like Waymo are much further ahead there, actually running fully autonomous rides in some cities. So when you think about robotaxis becoming routine, well, remember the real timelines and the big hurdles, both regulatory and technical, that are still there.
Good point. Lastly, just a quick word on politics and tech trade tensions. There's been chatter about Elon Musk's influence in Washington.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. My read, looking at the sources and commentary, is that Musk's money and his tweets maybe don't carry as much weight politically as, say, a Donald Trump endorsement within the Republican Party. Musk sometimes seems perhaps a little naive about how power really works in D.C., thinking it's all about money and backroom deals when politicians are also heavily swayed by, voter pressure and party leadership.
And shifting to trade, we're seeing new U.S. tariffs impacting goods from Japan, South Korea, Brazil, Canada. That hits the auto sector, which is very tech-heavy. Plus, NVIDIA's CEO, Jensen Huang, recently met with President Trump at the White House. Presumably, they talked about U.S. restrictions on exporting tech to China.
Yeah, NVIDIA's big concern there is losing out to Chinese competitors like Huawei, if the U.S. keeps tight restrictions on selling advanced chips to China. China's just a massive market for chips, and there's this constant balancing act with the dual-use risk chips being used for commercial stuff versus military applications. Huang's argument is basically that U.S. tech companies need to sell into China to stay ahead, to keep competitors like Huawei in check, and ultimately make sure the U.S. tech ecosystem remains dominant globally. It's a really tricky balance between national security and market leadership.
It's so clear that these huge geopolitical forces and trade decisions end up trickling down, influencing the cost and availability of the tech products you use every day. It really is all connected from your Amazon cart to global trade talks. And that brings us to the end of this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from how retail is changing to the different ways Apple and Hugging Face are innovating, the hidden power of SAP, Europe's AI ambitions, and even how geopolitics weaves through it all. It's pretty amazing how interconnected these seemingly separate developments are. Our goal, as always, was to give you some valuable, easy-to-digest insights from across this huge tech landscape, maybe offering a fresh way to look at things.
Yeah, and as you mull all this over, here's maybe one last thought to chew on. How will this relentless march of AI integration for those hidden enterprise systems we talked about, all the way to consumer robots like Ricci, how will it fundamentally change not just how we interact with technology, but the actual nature of work, of convenience in the years ahead? It's a future that's really being built right now, one click, one line of code at a time.
Definitely a lot to think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious and keep exploring this complex, always changing world of technology.